In this video, myself, an ex-Goldman Sachs employee, will react to CEO of Fresh and Fit podcast getting cancelled by his own audience. So let's go through this example here. I'm not here to denigrate this particular individual or talk bad about their podcast. I don't want to get caught up in that kind of drama part of YouTube and this type of space. But let's just see what we can learn to help you benefit in your career, right? We have a podcast host who's now known as the Fresh CEO. He discusses various things with his co-host in the Fresh and Fit podcast about relationships, dating, having families, traditional family roles, very pro-masculine, maybe anti-feminist, anti-liberal, more conservative. They don't really take a position too much in terms of having kids, but they are a bit more pro-life, I would say, and take the conservative position rather than pro-choice. And they're effectively being exposed here for being hypocritical in the way they present themselves. Now, as you can see here, it summarizes that they help men around women, finances, and fitness. These are the topics covered in their podcast. And the scandal starts when you have this relationship between Daisy Cheng, who is the woman you can see above, and this guy who's the co-host of the podcast. Now, what we have is essentially this guy is being quite pro-men in the sense of telling men to vet the woman that they're dating, make sure they're not with them for the money or to use them or manipulate them, making sure that the men they're dating are not, the woman that they're dating are good quality women. They're not, like I say, gold diggers. They're not just simply using them for clout. They're not going to manipulate or accuse them or wrongly accuse them in terms of relationships and the way the law is quite rigged against men in terms of hashtag me too and things like that. Now, these are all things that have kind of backfired with this guy, right? He essentially made a major mistake that you should not make in your professional career, in your personal brand, whatever that is. He essentially risked his reputation for this woman, right? It's called a reputational risk or franchise risk. When you risk the reputation of yourself in a professional setting, of the franchise, the company you're working for, through essentially creating a scandal, right? In this case, he essentially got this woman pregnant, encouraged her to get rid of the baby, essentially. And then he has all these text messages back and forth with her, which appears that he's simping, he's over-pandering to this girl, he's doing things that he would discourage on his own podcast, right? And it shows inconsistency in terms of professional branding. Now, there's many things we can learn from this. Anything you do put in writing could backfire, whether it's on an email with co-workers, whether it's in your personal life. You could be at work having a very successful career. Maybe one email or one joke you make on a chat with a female co-worker could backfire. You could get cancelled, hashtag me too. A woman could falsely accuse you on an event, a company Christmas event, a company drinking event after work. She could say you did something inappropriate to her. There is a risk of that there. And in many ways, women can be the downfall of men if they're not closely vetting how they're interacting with them, how they're keeping things on track record, what phone calls are being had, what's in writing, how could that be misperceived in the future, and it could impact the man's reputation in the future. So that's why you should be extra careful with how you're being portrayed on these messages and things like that, right? Because this guy is essentially, unless he recovers in some way, which I can't see possible, he's essentially destroyed his professional reputation within this sphere. Even though he's self-employed, I'm sure he's making a ton of money from Patreon, from people signing up to the podcast and their other products and courses and books, and also their sponsorships, their affiliates and commissions and things like that. But he's kind of done everything that is the opposite of what he portrays in a professional setting, which is his podcast. Now, if you're a CEO or in a senior role or even in a junior role, and you've got to play up to certain type of professional standards, and you do anything that undermines that or the opposing of that or the opposing of the company's values, it's very easy for them to get rid of you. There's always 100 other people who want to get that job that you're working at in a finance industry, in any corporate role. If this podcast, this Fresh and Fit so-called masculinity self-improvement podcast goes down tomorrow, there's hundreds of other podcasts that are out there that kind of have a similar message, Coach Greg Adams, and Rollo Tomassi in The Rational Male, Andrew Tate type of content. there's tons of others that could take their spot tomorrow, right? And this guy's probably making, I think they do exaggerate the amount of money they're making with their perhaps rented sports cars or property that they say they own that they might not own. So there's lots of things that can be quite misleading here. And it's kind of backfired quite dramatically, right? It's been widely discussed. Millions of views have gone on YouTube to people who are criticizing the dynamic between them. And it just goes to show you, like, how much power does a woman have in an accusation to destroy a man's reputation, right? Not just in the context of maybe him saying he doesn't support getting rid of a baby on his podcast, but then in real life he would, or saying that he'd only prefer a certain type of woman, whereas in real life he's maybe interacting with the type of woman he's very critical of. It shows that, you know, a woman can accuse a man of anything. In this case, based on the text, based on the audio, it seems like it could be true, but she's accusing him of misleading her, of taking advantage of her. Now, you could be working a professional career, and then a woman who's completely unrelated to your workplace environment makes these type of accusations against you, and then all of a sudden your career's on the line, right? Because all modern workplaces are focused on liberalism, feminism, woke culture, however you want to define it. If a woman accuses you, even if it's completely false, it's a very high risk of it damaging your professional reputation due to cancel culture, and you could essentially lose your job or be perceived negatively at work by female co-workers, female management, and may not be able to progress in your career at that company based on those rumors, even if they're completely falsified, right? Now, you can see they had this whole show where they're addressing the allegations. They have all these other types of debates around this particular topic. As you can see here on YouTube, they have countless videos by other content creators who are very critical of both of them. One of the co-host of the podcast, the co-worker, had a kind of weird emotional meltdown complaining about this, and you can see how many hundreds of thousands of views this is adding up to. I won't go into all the scandal and things like that, but essentially you can look into it yourself and see a bit more about this. It just goes to show, right, that, you know, all this public drama can really affect work, affect your professional reputation. There's many people at work who portray themselves a particular way on social media, and don't be under any illusion. You know, people you work with will Google your name, they will Instagram your name, they will search your name on a Twitter or a Facebook and see, oh, what is this person like? I remember working at a major American investment bank, and of course you go to the investment bank and portray yourself quite professionally, but my Facebook it's really for friends, and I keep it kind of private. But, you know, a co-worker had found it and made some jokes about a t-shirt I was wearing. I was at a music concert at the time, and it just goes to show that, like, you know, people are very petty in the work environment. They're very passive aggressive. If they can use any little thing to denigrate, to push you down so they can take one step above and climb the corporate ladder in quite a ruthless environment, they will, right? And you can see from the amount of people who have kind of attacked this guy, regardless of whether you like him or not, agree with him or not. I mean, you've got an entire YouTube channel which has clocked up millions of views being critical of this guy here, right? You can see some of the view counts on this particular topic, the last 4 or 5 videos, right? So you should just bear that in mind, right? When you're at work, again, your co-workers are not your friends. Any little scandal can be blown up to destroy your reputation completely, particularly the way with women accusing men. I always advise you, in a workplace environment, be careful of co-workers in general, particularly if you are a male. Be extra cautious of how you're interacting with female employees, how they could maybe gossip about you and spread a negative reputation about you based on maybe a slight joke you made, maybe an interaction you had with a female employee outside of work or after work drinks. All these things can be used against you years after the case. There are many other cases I could mention to you now where this has impacted people, right? There are many professional wrestlers, Adam Copeland, Enzo Amore. There are many other cases. I'm sure any niche interest you have, professional wrestling, podcasting, hip-hop, music industry, there's lots of false allegations that can be levied against men. And even if the allegation is debunked, your reputation has taken a hit that you can't really recover from. So what you can take from this is be extra careful in your written communication with women, be extra careful on how you're being perceived. If you have to be a bit quiet or a bit less social in the workplace environment, that's better to be less social than to be cancelled for making what people might consider an inappropriate statement or joke. And then also consider you have a personal professional brand, right? And you have to be consistent with that, right? There's no point having a LinkedIn where you're super professional, then having a public Instagram where you're unprofessional or maybe drinking too much alcohol or portraying a very fake image of yourself. And if you want to keep things private, you can have a private Instagram, private Facebook and things like that. And try not to mix the two worlds, because people are always looking for consistency. You can't be portraying yourself as one way when you're really the other. So remember this, take this into account. And just to finish up, right, can we say that women are the cause of downfall of all men? In terms of the corporate environment, in terms of public perception, you can say due to Me Too and cancel culture and false allegations, that does play a part in terms of men being wrongly accused or unfairly accused in certain scenarios, right? But there's a lot more to it than that. I don't think we can always just blame it on women in this sense. As men, you have to take personal responsibility. Unfortunately, you're living and working in a very unfair kind of work environment that can often work against your best interest, right? So, you have to protect yourself at all times. Unfortunately, it is an MMA, UFC fight. Be careful of your reputation, manage your reputational risk, be consistent with your personal and professional brand on social media, be careful of what message you're putting out there, make sure it's consistent with how you live your life, or change your messaging if your life is slightly different, because our lives are quite nuanced. Pretending you're like super conservative or traditional or woke or liberal or feminist or whatever your position is, or what your company's position is and what you are personally, if it differs radically, you should think carefully about how you're portraying yourself and how you manage that reputational risk. It's something major banks I've worked at like Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley do quite efficiently, and you need to take care when you do this, when it comes to your personal brand, when it comes to your workplace environment and how you're perceived at work. And also be aware any type of public drama that you might have in your personal life that spills into social media. It could go viral. It could end up on a podcast. It could end up being discussed in the workplace environment and affect your personal professional reputation. So it's something to be careful of. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. You have 2 recommended videos on your screen right now, a free ebook in the description, and I'll see you next time.